Today I'm going to be talking about the next major upswing in the price of silver and the valuation of silver and what situations could cause that. And for those of you who are speculators in the physical silver market, people that are buying silver with the hopes that they'll be able to resell it in the future for gains. Um, a lot of us, we focus on dollar targets, and I think that that's the wrong way of going about it. We should be focusing on the valuation. So I do think that there's going to be a major rise in the price of silver. But say you have a target of $50 silver. If we hit $50 silver, but the price of gas has gone to $8 or the price of your loaf of bread has doubled, then you really haven't seen any gains. So we shouldn't focus so much on dollar price targets. We should focus on exchange ratios and trades. And you could pin it to any number of different things, but I think the best way of doing it would be to take a variety of different, everyday items and compare the price per ounce of silver to what it will buy you in those and kind of average it out. So, if just one thing gets out of balance, you're not valuing it just based on that. You might take bread, you might take oil, you might take, you know, electricity or whatever it is, cost of a pair of shoes or whatever you want to use. But I'll take a variety of those things and average it out. Another thing, we probably shouldn't be looking at it in terms of dollar price total valuations. We should probably be looking at total number of ounces held. So that's another good thing is it's always going to be worth itself. So an ounce of silver is always going to be worth an ounce of silver. And again, if the price is doubled, but you can still only buy the same amount of that commodity, we should be looking at total number of ounces held. So now I'm going to get into a little bit about these different stories that you hear about shortages and new uses for silver, and it's all really interesting, and some of it's legit, some of it seems not to be, some of it's going to have an impact on price, some of it won't. So we've all heard like this 500 ounces in I think it was a Tomahawk missile or a cruise missile or something, and that number seems to kind of come out of nowhere. So it might contain a lot of silver in one of those things. I wouldn't be surprised. I've heard talk about it's used in the wiring and stuff like that, and it may be. But that 500-ounce number seems to just be kind of pulled out of nowhere, so I don't put much stock in that number. And then also, I mean, that's not what you want to base your profiting or investing off. It's a terrible way to want to profit off of a commodity. So, but I really question the 500 ounces in a missile number. I think somebody just made that up. They may well contain a lot of silver, but I don't know if that's the number. Um, and also, it's kind of that whole thing would have some interesting implications just in the fact that if they use one and say it destroys like a whole block radius, well, now you've got to take all the demand that would have been created in that area out of the equation. People's cell phones and jewelry or whatever they might be buying. Maybe there's a couple stackers in that area that got wiped out. But so 500 ounces, boom, in a missile supposedly, if you believe that, and then that whole area is kind of out of the mix, and now all their demand is negated. And in the future, when they're rebuilding, then maybe that demand is increased because now they all need to replace everything. Everything needs to be rebuilt. So maybe it would cause some kind of spike in demand during the rebuilding. But all in all, I wouldn't want to base my investing off of that type of information, not only morally, but I also just don't feel that it's correct information. And there's also a lot of variables there with different implications it could have on demand in the area affected. So we've all heard that one, so I just thought I'd mention it. Another one is all this stuff with colloidal silver, and then you also have um, silver like microbe protection. I was looking for the name of it, but nanoparticles, silver nanoparticles being used in socks and underwear and clothing and stuff like that. and that one's really interesting too. And I think that that has a promising future. But then again, with the nanoparticle, type application, I'm not sure how much it'll actually affect demand. If they can coat, a whole truckload of socks with 1 ounce of silver, I don't know that that's gonna have any kind of effect on the markets, other than the fact that it might have like a psychological effect on people seeing it marketed, where, if they got all these antimicrobial things with silver in it, maybe it would attract some attention. But just another thing that we hear a lot about and something to consider. Another one is the solar panel one. And now I was really surprised with the amount of silver that I saw supposedly used in a solar panel. And again, that number, I'm sure there's a huge variation from one company's process to another. And again, I don't know if that number is legitimate, but I was kind of surprised they use a fair amount of silver in the solar panels. I think I heard something close to 1 ounce. It was like maybe 3/4 of an ounce or something in a solar panel. And I don't know what size panel they're talking about. I don't know if they're talking about the whole panel or a cell, or what they're basing that number on. But it was more than I expected. I've also heard flat screen TVs have a good amount, something close to 1 ounce of silver in a flat screen. But again, I don't put much stock in that number. And are we talking about a 60-inch flat screen or a 13-inch, or there's a lot of stuff there that's not quite clear. But those are some interesting demands, also with the cell phones and everything. But a lot of these markets are kind of saturated, not so much with the solar panel. That I think has potential for quite a bit of growth. But they could also find a technology to bypass silver and possibly use something else. Um, the cell phone thing and electronics, seems to be somewhat saturated. I'm sure there's places where there's still a lot of growth to be had, in some of the third world and stuff like that. Here in the U.S., people are going to keep buying that junk, but I don't see it going too much more than what it is now. I mean, how much of this stuff can you have? So, and again, it's really small amounts of silver, so I don't know that that's a big effect on the pricing in the markets. So I was kind of running all those through my head, and you hear all these stories about it, about shortages and all this other stuff, and new demands that are going to really drive it through the roof. And so I was thinking about the last time that they had a big run up, and that was with the Hunt brothers. And I think there's a potential for that, and I think that that's more where we're going to see this giant demand and the huge price increases and huge valuation increases come from. So I've thought before about, the average person just waking up to stacking and honest money and, solid commodities and stuff. I don't think it's going to happen. I've watched some of this stuff with Mark Dice. I'm sure you guys have. Some of it's really funny, where he's gone right in front of a coin store and tried to sell people like American Silver Eagles, or he's tried to use like a gold buffalo coin or whatever. And it's really interesting. Now I'm sure he only kind of picks the dumbest people, but I think that that's more the norm than the exception. Like, a lot of people are just not interested in, silver and gold, and they don't care about it. They don't know about it. And they're not just going to wake up. People aren't just going to like wake up and start buying, constitutional coinage. A few people have, and that's great. And I think those people are going to be ahead of the game when things do change. But I just don't see the masses just out of the blue, watching some video and waking up to the fact that silver is a solid, asset and commodity. So I've kind of put that one aside, and I've looked more closely at the Hunt Brothers scenario. And I think that that's closer to what we're going to see when we see the huge move up. And I think it will happen. Now, my first thing was, I was kind of thinking about agriculture, and maybe that you would get some demand from some agriculture producers, or something like that. But on the other hand, those people are really ingrained in the current system. Most of them are subsidized with different farm subsidies. They're mostly now like mega farm corporations. There's only a handful of producers. Some big companies like Monsanto and stuff are heavily involved in a lot of the different aspects, different they control a lot of it, and they're really, pretty deep in with the system, to where they probably don't want to shake things up. So I said it's probably not going to come from agriculture, maybe from another country. They might have something where that would happen. Then I was thinking about, Saudi Arabia and the Hunt brothers and, that thing, the oil connection. That one's possible, but again, it's already happened, so the chance of it happening twice, maybe not. And then the Saudis, again, are pretty heavily involved with the system and probably don't want to shake things up too much. So it might not come from the Saudis. Now, Brazil or someplace, maybe, Brazil might start trading. Say, their oil and putting the money into silver. That's a possibility. What I really think the big one is possibly from a software or a electronics company, developer or manufacturer, where they might be selling these products and then hedging their their wealth with precious metals, and where the silver market is so small, and also where those companies would be connected to using it for an industrial application. So, say they bought a whole warehouse full of silver, they're not going to get stuck with it because worst case scenario, as the price goes up because of their demand, they'll have a whole warehouse full of it that they could use in manufacturing their electronics, and it would be a great way to hedge their wealth. And I think that there's a strong chance it could come from electronics manufacturers or even like a software company or something. A lot of those seem to be a little more independent than some of the, say, the big agriculture or big oil and stuff. So I think that it could be electronics manufacturers. One of the big companies could just start to, roll a whole bunch of money into precious metals, and that could really affect the market. Things are really tight with supply and demand, and stackers do have a place in that where any what would be excess demand is now investment demand, coin demand. So and also with anybody that's dollar cost averaging, if you're putting a certain amount per month, if the price goes down, say the price cuts in half, like we saw from 50 down to 25, now your um, demand is double the ounces per month. So stuff like that has a big effect on such a small market. But I think it's going to be a big company or a wealthy person, and some of the wealthy people are really ingrained in the current system too and might not want to shake it up. But all it takes is one, multimillionaire silver bug, and the whole thing can change. Some of them are probably a little weary after the Hunt brothers thing, but if one of these, huge multimillionaires, you get Soros or Carlos Slim or somebody starts, just buying tons of silver, that's going to totally change the whole game. The other one that I was really thinking about is Mexico. I think Mexico could be the big key to the whole thing, where you got all the major silver mines down there. One of the mines themselves could start withholding silver, or rolling some of their money into, saving it in silver. I've heard some of them have done it, but I don't know on what scale and which ones it was specifically. But say they're producing, 1 million ounces. If they start withholding that 1 million ounces and it drives the price up 400%, they could sell a quarter of 1 million ounces and still have the same income stream, the same profit. Um, so, I think that the miners could be key, especially if, say, Mexico wanted to nationalize their mines or something like that. They're the number one producer right now of silver, so it wouldn't take much for them to really shake things up. And if there is uh, a squeeze on the supply end, um, then some of this stuff that requires silver, it's such a small amount that it doesn't really matter the price. They're going to keep buying it and keep using it. So their move would be to shoot the price up to the point where they can withdraw silver from the market, basically get stackers and investors to sell their physical silver so that they can meet their industrial demand. That's what I like about silver so much, is it's such a tight supply demand chain, and a lot of the demand is necessity where they need that silver. So any excess that we're sucking up as stackers, if there's a shortage, they're going to look to us for our silver, and that's where you see these big potential gains in purchasing power. So it's just something to keep in mind. And as far as the people waking up, the masses, I think it's possible, but that's not going to be what creates a huge move up in the price. That's going to be the last piece of the puzzle. So if a huge company starts buying up all the silver, or if one of the mines starts withholding all the silver from the market and you see a giant move up and it's headline news everywhere, you know that now your old silver chain is worth, thousands of dollars or whatever. That's where you're going to get your average person jumping in, and all of a sudden they're a big investment expert or something, because they're going to be late to the party on it. So just wanted to talk a little bit about what I thought is the potential for a huge move up, and I do think that potential's there. So the Hunt brothers were, a while ago, and it was only a couple guys. Now there's a lot more people, also a lot more industrial demand with all the electronics and solar panels and whatnot. And I think that the potential is there for a giant move, and it might be a long-term move. It might not just be a short manipulated spike. That supply-demand chain is really thin, and we're the extra piece of the puzzle. We're the ones they're going to look to when they do need extra silver to meet that demand. And just be ready to take advantage and capitalize on it. Thanks for watching.